could start by telling us a little bit more about your center, what kind of research you do.
I'm head of a center at Institute for Social Research that we call CORE. It's a center for research on gender equality. And in particular, we study the gender equality situation, gender equality challenges, and etc. in the labor market. And we also study the balance between work and family, plus extra things. Yeah.
When was this established?
The center was established in 2013, and we now have a regular funding from the Ministry of Culture and Equality.
So why do you find this research important that you do in your institute?
I think especially in today's society, I think it's very important to have a kind of fact-oriented analysis of the situation. Of course, when it comes to gender equality, but in fact on most topics, because it's important for how we understand the society we live in, but also for policy making. What kind of measures could be implemented to make the changes that we want for society.
Do you have any examples in your research that where you've adopted this research into policies, or where you have good examples of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not so easy to say that our research has led to this or that measure, but we know from looking at public documents, policy reports to Parliament, and so on, that our research is used actively to argue for different types of policies. Maybe the most concrete example is the regulation of gender balance for corporate boards, which was introduced, or it was adopted by the Parliament in 2003 and implemented in 2008, which says that there should be at least 40% of each gender on at least the big corporate boards of the companies at the stock exchange and publicly owned companies and so on. And I think that the research that we have been doing for quite many years about the persisting male dominance in leadership stratas in especially the business world was an important background for implementation of that regulation.
And that regulation, has it actually resulted in anything, in any concrete?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it has clearly changed the situation when it comes to board positions, which is what the regulation regulates or the law regulates. I mean, when the debate started at the end of the 1990s, there was, I mean, almost no women in corporate boards. It was less than 5% women in those boards, and today it's more than 40% women on the boards. So yeah, so the regulation has made a major impact.
How was this proceed among the companies when this regulation came on board?
Yeah, I mean, that part of the story is in fact very interesting, because there was a lot of opposition in the business world, among the companies, among the people representing interest organizations for business and so on. But they also took a quite constructive approach to the issue, starting with different form of learning programs and things like that to make women candidates capable and empowered to take onto these positions. I think they are still principally against the regulation, but they're actually working to support it in many ways.
What is the gender pay gap in Norway now, and how do we explain it?
Yeah, there's different ways to assess the gender pay gap. If you look at gross incomes, women earn 2/3 of what men earns. But what is more common to do is to look at hourly wage differences, and then the gap is on 11%, which means that for every 89 kroner per hour a woman earns, a man earns 100%. So that's the average difference. The main reason for the gender pay gap in Norway is the gender segregated labor market. Women working in the women-dominated occupations, most typically within the public sector, are paid less in relevant to their length of education than the male-dominated occupations located in the private sector.
So these are like the structural differences that you see in today's Norway. As a researcher, how shall we combat those differences?
Yeah, I think again, there's not an easy answer to that question, but I think the implementation of the activity duties in the equality and anti-discrimination legislation are important. All companies, especially those with more than 50 employees, have to report on the pay situations for their employees. There's going to be more transparency when it comes to pay differences company-wise. And I think that will be an important tool to discuss and renegotiate pays, income in companies.
So what government policies do we have to reduce the gender pay gap?
We could say that we don't have much government policies to address the gender pay gap, but we have the activity duty in the equality and anti-discrimination legislation which has been recently specified and which will or have the potential at least to be a powerful tool for changing the pay situation within companies. But we don't have a government policy to change the more kind of structural reasons for the gender pay gap. And this also have to do with the Nordic model and the negotiations between employers and employees organizations, which is where there's a broad consensus that they are the main responsible for wage negotiations in Norway. The only problem is that the way wages are negotiated in Norway neither increases the wage gap or decreases the wage gap, but holds it very stable.
Why is that?
Yeah, that is because the wage formation system is organized so that the industries that are in competition with abroad with other countries are negotiating first and sets the standard for the wage formation, and all the other occupations, industries are to set their wages according to the competitive exposed industries, how they do in the wage negotiations. So I mean, this gives little flexibility in, for example, upward adjusting the wages of the women-dominated occupation, such as nurses, teachers, etc.
You mentioned the activity and reporting duty. What is that?
Actually, from when the Norwegian Gender Equality Act was enforced in 1978, an activity duty was a part of the Gender Equality Act. And then it was enlarged in 2002, including also private companies, employers, and so on. But the problem was that it was not really specified in a way that made companies know how to work it out. How do we do the activity duty that is forced on us, and how do we report on it? So recently this has been specified, and especially when it comes to the gender pay gap, there's quite specific demands put on the companies and on how to report on the pay situation in their company, which promises to give some transparency on pay differences between women and men, and for that sake on other groups that will make it easier, probably, to introduce active measures to change differences. Yeah.
How is that perceived?
I think it's very different. I think some of the big companies are seeing this as an opportunity to work actively and strategically with equality issues in their companies. But of course, there's also a lot of paperwork connected to the activity and especially the reporting duty. So there are also, of course, some opposition. But I hope that this company will see that the biggest job is the first time you do it, and then it will be much easier to do for the coming years.
What do you say would be the major challenges in this context?
I think that, for many companies, this will be perceived as more bureaucracy. So that will be a challenge. But I actually think that, I think the promising part of it is that that if you get the figures, numbers for how things look in your company, it's much easier to implement measures, to take action, to change them. And I also think that the quite well-developed welfare state of Norway has, in a way, come maybe not to the end, but quite far when it comes to other types of state arrangements, such as kindergartens, parental leave, and so on, which are very important for gender equality. And the next step to go is to look inside the companies and what is happening in working life to promote equality.
But would that also address the challenge that you mentioned in the first about female versus male-dominated occupation?
Yeah, I think, no, I don't think that this policy are able to address the pay differences that goes between female-dominated and male-dominated occupations. And I actually think that this is a big problem for the future, because what we really need now is that more boys or men go into the female-dominated occupations where there will be a big need for labor in the future. For example, in the health occupations and also in teaching, there's a big need for people in the future, and there is much more women taking into these occupations. But what we actually see is that also women tend more to want to go for gender balanced or male-dominated educations and occupations. So there will be probably a big need for labor in these occupations in the future, and I think that pay is an important part of that. And when I say that, I think it's actually also based on research, studies of what is important for boys and girls when they are going to choose educations. Show that for boys, the pay of the occupations they are going into are quite important. Yeah.
And moving on to gender equality in leaders, top positions, I know this is also your field of research. So what is the gender balance on the top of the business world in Norway?
Yeah, the studies we are doing shows that, or last year, it was 40% women among the CEOs of the 200 biggest Norwegian companies. I mean, these are small numbers for women, but still it has developed quite a lot since we started to survey the situation in the biggest companies. In 2016, it was 7.5% women in these CEO positions, so it has actually kind of almost doubled. But still, this means that it's really very male-dominated. But if you include the top management group, the situation is a bit better. There's today 25% women on average in the top management groups of the 200 biggest companies. The only problem is that women more often are situated in the so-called staff positions, which less often leads to the absolute top of the companies. So they remain in these staff positions and are not so relevant for the CEO position.
And the decision-making of the companies. Then.
Yeah.
Does that goes for the public sector as well, or?
No, I think the situation is quite different in the public sector. I mean, it's or at least it's more gender balanced at the top of the public sector, but especially in the state sector. But when you look at the municipal sector, I mean, there's also a question of the balance of the gender composition of the employees and top management, and then I mean men are relatively well represented also in the municipal sector. Yeah.
But how does CORE map the development of gender balance?
We start with going into the websites of the 200 biggest company. We have a list from the Business Register of what are the 200 biggest companies, but only a few of these companies really provide us with good information on the situation. So in many cases, or in fact probably in most cases, we have to contact the companies and try to find out what the gender composition is in top management groups, and also in the boards of these companies. So I mean, this tend to surprise us that the information is often so hard to get. But still, that's also one reason for I think why this work is important, because we then makes it in the open what the situation is. Yeah, transparency.
From a researcher's perspective, how can we increase the number of women in leadership? What works?
Yeah, I think there's several approaches that are important for increasing the gender balance in companies. I think that, the figures and numbers, what does it really look like? What does it look like on the level beneath the top and the level beneath that again? Have it had the recruitment that we need to get more women in. But I also think that you have to look carefully at the gender differences in the competitive situation in doing careers. The best situation for a man in progressing his career is that he has a partner that is taking most of the responsibility for children, housework, etc. And sometimes, these men have a partner with an equal demanding career as themselves. The best situation for the woman is that she has a partner with an equal career situation as her. For most women in these career tracks, they have a partner with a more demanding career, especially when they have small children. So it's really so that men and women in these career tracks have different competitive situations. And one problem connected with this is that it seems like the big career steps have to be done when you are, let's say, between 30 and 40 years, or 35, 45 years, or something like that. And still, we do and are expected to work at least till we're 70 years old. So probably it would be better for the companies, for society, and also for men and women themselves if you had a longer stretch in when you were an attractive person for career.
But that's not something that the government itself can do, or?
No, I think we need to talk about this. We need to have an open debate about how gender and age is intersected in a way, and that the situation for men are often not the same as for women. And I actually think that the companies can be front runners here. They can institute policies in their own companies that at least are more aware of how to accommodate for different career situations and different phases of a career.
So actually changes from inside on what is the ideal time in a working life where you are also attractive as a leader or leading positions.
Yeah, and I think hopefully the companies will, the more transparency there is about the situation in different companies and what measures they implement to increase equality, there's also an increased possibility of learning between companies. Yeah. Another thing that I think is important is that companies take an active role when it comes to fathers when they get children, so that there are the same expectations on men that, as on women, that they're actually going to have parental leave, and what are the situations they want when they have parental leave. Do they want to be a part of the workings of their department and so on, or do they want to stay outside? But these are issues that companies can have an active and gender equal approach to. I think that one interesting aspect is that we see large similarities between men and women when it comes to how ambitious they are, how eager they are to make a career. So something happens on the way. And what happens on the way is that men and women have different opportunities in their careers when they get children. And I mean, this is in a way something that is very obvious, that I mean, if you have a partner that has also a very demanding career, that puts harder choices upon you and your possibilities to make your own career than if you have a partner with a less demanding career. And this is a gender difference with gender repercussions in a way. So I mean, if the companies want the best of both the men and the women in their company to blossom, to do the best out of their careers, they have to have a more awareness of the different situation when it comes to how to follow your own career, your competitive situation. And I mean, it's also relatively easy to plan because I mean, it's often known quite early that a woman is going to have a child, so it's possible to plan and accommodate for it.
But why should companies do that?
Yeah, I think I was mentioning one reason for why they should do this, and that is if they want to have the most out of the talent they already have recruited. And also, I think it's necessary to not think too short termed about what you're getting out of the people that you have employed. For many, a career lasts for several decades, and you should not just look at what they are able to do for most of us, just a few years with small children.
Have you seen in the research as well that this can also be relates to attitudes?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, one of the big changes that we have seen in the recent decades is that attitudes have changed a lot. I mean, there's very high support for gender equal sharing of family duties, and also of equal sharing of economic responsibility in the family. And I mean, for a couple of decades ago, this looked quite differently. People were favoring more gender traditional roles. But today, I mean, it's 80–90% of people in representative studies who says that they prefer the gender equal way of living. And I think that this is important. But then again, it's often very hard to go from attitudes to practice. I mean, in the daily lives we are living and all the tensions that we have to deal with, of course, easily more gender traditional roles evolve despite of changing attitudes.
This goes for both men and women?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, first we saw that women's attitudes to gender equality changed quite rapidly, but men are more and more quite close to women today when it comes to what they think about gender equality in the family, in work life, and so on. But of course, it depends on what questions you ask and how you address the question. I mean, there's still gender differences, but when it comes to, I mean, kind of these basic parts of the gender equality debate, I think men and women are quite agreeing on these issues.